Welcome to the journey of an aesthete, a comprehensive examination of all things aesthetic, the arts, the humanities, and what it means to be human.
Is Frank La Mendola there?
Speaking.
Frank, this is Mitch Hampton, and you're on Journey of an Aesthete podcast.
Hey, Mitch, how are you?
I'm great because I'm talking with you. I don't even know. I just like to laugh because I'm looking at your bio and your resume and all your accomplishments, and you've done so much that I really.
When I look at it, I feel like I've lived many lifetimes.
That's very clear. Like many lifetimes within a single lifetime. So I'm just going to do a little introduction. I have many kinds of guests on my show. Some I've met personally, some I don't know. I believe you are a friend of Laurie Strickland, our producer, right? So she brought me your attention, and I looked at what you've done. And I have to say, one of the things that I like doing on my show is having people that are very different from me, that have skills that I suck at, for example, or do things I've never even tried. And you are, I don't cook, and I can't stitch or sew or seem to save my life, and you excel at these. So you're, among many things, you are a master chef. It looks like a baker, make cakes, and you also, I believe, are quite adept at making handbags, purses, luggage, other things of that nature. Do you mind going back in time, talking about Queens or New York, and talking about how you came to have all these many talents and the journey of your particular skills? That would be great.
Yeah, thanks. So, well, I was always a creative person, even as a very young child. Always liked to sketch and draw and just create things. And it was, and of course, in grammar school and high school, I continued showing a lot of interest in that. And it was actually in high school, right before I was about to graduate, one of my art teachers, for some reason, I was really fascinated with sketching fashion. Not necessarily designing it, but sketching it. I just like the sort of the flow and the stylized look of it. And his suggestion was maybe you should look into going to fashion school.
Yep.
So I took the suggestion, and I did that. And I studied illustration. And then I worked as a fashion illustrator in the early 80s.
Do you mind if I hold on? That's so much richness in just that. So I'm going to pause you there. That's fantastic. So A lot of our audience might not know. A lot of the, of course, top not just fashion designers, but also painters, even fine artists have background in illustrating fashion. And you are, of course, someone that was in the thick of all that, and of all times, the 80s. So what? Talk more about those experiences, or what comes to mind when you think about those days and doing that particular kind of, or the craft of fashion illustration, which is an art form all unto itself,
Yeah. Yes. And back then I remember I was sort of so inspired by, there were many fashion illustrators that would get their work published weekly in New York Times and in Women's Wear Daily. Today it's mostly photography, but back in the 80s, it was all illustrated.
That's right.
And so there was definitely, as you said, there was sort of very well-known fashion illustrators back then that I really looked at and that inspired me. And and it was the whole fashion scene back then. It was a lot different. It was like Studio 54 and it was actually a lot of fun when I think about it. And
did you go to 54?
I did. I didn't necessarily go when it was when the celebrities were there. I kind of was able to go afterwards. I was right out of high school.
That's crazy.
So it took me a couple of years.
Oh, you got to give me at least one story about a night at 54, just for 5 minutes.
It was pretty uneventful. I remember the person I went with, my friend that I went with, who also, by the way, went to the same design school as I went to. And he and I went to Studio 54. I remember, and it was the first time for me. And I remember the music that it was the song that was playing that stuck in my head was Madonna's Borderline. Like, I remember that song playing.
Oh, wow.
I remember there being a big moon, like a crescent moon.
Oh, they still had that.
Over the,
that was a big, that was a big
yeah,
design
that's sort of like iconic, right?
I think that was Ian Schrager's, I think that was his idea. I don't know if I'm mistaken. I'm about an expert on 54, but go ahead. It's Madonna. Well, Madonna,
yeah,
that was Madonna's great period musically, right? I mean, she kept just extraordinary pop song after pop song, and just really totally unique.
And I just remember having a really good time with him. It was just like a lot of fun dancing and listening to really good music. And, yeah, but things are a lot different today. But it always, when I think of that period, I always think of sort of like that experience. But I was really, when I was in design school, I was really focused on school. I mean, I spent most of my time just doing the projects that I was given and really trying to excel in that particular field. And I really loved it. I mean, I was really, it was new, and I saw that there was an opportunity, and when I left school, I mean, it was like a 3-year program.
Yeah.
And
what school? May I ask what school was this? Was this Parsons, or where was?
No, the name of the school it no longer exists, but at the time it was called Traphagen School of Fashion.
Okay.
And it was in Gramercy Park South.
Oh, that's a beautiful location.
And it was it was like sort of a school that like designers like Halston and Anne Klein.
They went there.
It's
amazing.
The other designers sort of escaped me at the moment, but it was definitely like old school. No pun intended. And it was great. And it was a small school, much smaller than like a Fashion Institute Technology. Although I ended up going there.
Take us back. This is interesting. Hold that thought, because a lot of people, when a decade like the 80s leaves its mark, for better and for worse, people often look back 20, 30, 40 years later, just like they do the 70s, right? But every era has a uniqueness. So when you think about the styles of the 80s in that period, I don't know, 82 to 85, what comes to mind? Like, what kinds of silhouettes were you drawing, or what were the if you had to sort of talk about it sort of objectively, descriptively, rather than what were people wearing in general, would you say? If that
from what I can recall, there was two different vibes happening. One was the sort of the Oscar de la Renta's, Ralph Lauren, Calvin Klein, like Isaac Mizrahi. I remember Isaac Mizrahi. Maybe just started back then, but it was like these big, like fall, like almost like ball gown type of taffeta, a lot of taffeta, oversized print, very like classic with like a modern edge to it, the way I recall it. And then there was sort of like the beginning of like punk rock and like zippers and safety pins everywhere, like really exaggerated shoulders.
Epaulets.
Also like Terry Mugler. His designs were very like avant-garde. So it was sort of like a contrast between like modern classic and sort of avant-garde. So
punk.
It was interesting.
It's very interesting. That's why I asked you to speak about it, because you were there in the thick of it, and also there's a something about drawing clothes, drawing fabric. Talk about that a little bit, because that is a special entry into fashion, right? It's different than it's its own world as opposed to sewing actual clothes or right?
Right.
So
it is interesting, because for me as an artist, I looked at, now that I didn't realize it at the time, but I could realize it now. And I share this with my students because I teach fashion now, is that it's almost like I look at it back then, I looked at it more as being like sculptural, like form and shape and volume, as opposed to like fabric. And, it happens to be fabrics that were creating this, but, so I looked at, as an artist and as an illustrator, it would be, sort of like form and shape.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until years later that I started to actually sort of show more interest in like actual garment construction. That's like, how are those forms actually created?
Yeah. And of course, the relationship between the fiber and the cloth and the design. Those are right. Those are right. And so you're drawing these illustrations. And What was the year or what period of time did you start actually getting your hands on cloth and, and going to that side of it? If you had to pick a time.
It was sort of like, I would say it was a good 10 years after that. I mean, I really focused on just illustrating and never really to me, it was always like design is different than illustration, and my strength and my sort of, passion isn't drawing the fashion, not necessarily designing it.
Mm-hmm.
And another friend of mine who graduated from the same school, who's a designer, not necessarily an illustrator, started teaching at some of the fashion schools in Manhattan. And I remember taking one of her courses in clothing, and I think it was basic dressmaking or pattern making or something. And it took me a while to sort of start understanding, okay, what does a garment look like flat?
Mm-hmm.
And then that became a real strong interest of mine and a passion of how to construct a pattern.
Mm.
I mean, there's a lot of other stuff that happens in between that, but it wasn't until then. And each, and it's not just any, fabrics react differently. The weight of the fabric and the softness and all that stuff, it acts differently. I think that really came about more now that I think about it. I'm telling you all this.
Yeah.
When I got into designing the handbags.
Yeah, I mean, of course, that's later on. If you wanted to go there now, we could. But I was thinking that because you've had you've had many careers, and I feel like there's a period of time before that. So if you don't mind staying before we get to the handbags, but so yeah, I don't really know. It fascinates me. I remember I was very fortunate to have a model on my show, Sunny Redmond, who worked a lot with Halston, and she talked a lot about. And also Oscar de la Renta and a couple other names, Daniel Rhodes, maybe, I don't know. But one of the things everybody talked about was how every fabric is different, right? And how, for example, linen is totally different than wool crepe, is different than rayon, right? Different kinds of cottons. And so you were learning that, right? You were finally realizing, it's not just the fabric, it's what you can design with a certain fabric, right?
Exactly. In fact, I had a course that it was I think it was watercolor, and in that course they taught you how to render all the different fabrics satin and taffeta and wool and how to create texture.
Yeah.
So from an illustrator's standpoint, it's to your point, the differences between the fabrics and the way they look and the way they drape on the human body.
Yeah, it's really bringing me back in time. My very first girlfriend when I was living in Boston in the 80s wore a lot of Anne Klein. You mentioned Anne Klein. That was a big 80s name, right? Anne Klein at the Limited, I think, or I don't remember again, this is a different era, but it just bringing me back to that.
Yeah, and it was really, for me, Anne Klein, when I think of Anne Klein, it's sort of the look, similar to Donna Karan. When Donna Karan first came out, it was all about women, empowering women in the workforce. That's what I think of. The sort of the clothing that a successful woman would wear in the office. Almost like man tailored, but a little the feminine twist. But that was a big part in the early 80s, actually.
Sure. What kind of stuff were you wearing personally at that time in terms of clothes? I mean, I don't know, Jane Barnes, or I'm just my brain is
being a student, not working. I don't even remember.
You don't remember?
It wasn't. And again, because I didn't consider myself, even though I was going to fashion school, to be a fashionista. I was an artist.
Okay.
But that's a good question, because I always loved clothing. Yeah. But not having the kind of finances, I guess, as a student that I would. But I remember what other students wore.
Well, the 80s.
I mean, it was funny.
Yeah. The 80s was a time of really kind of prominent designers, right? Like a Armani, or like a Jane Barnes, or I don't know who. There was so many. There's so many at that time, right?
Yeah, and then again, late 80s, early 90s, it was all about Versace.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole movement. Yeah.
Interesting.
But I mean, fashion, what I've learned over the years too is it's sort of cyclical. I mean, it comes back in a different way, though, with a little twist to it. But I mean, even my illustrations, I save everything, and I still have my work from when I was in high school. And on social media, once in a while, I'll post something.
I'd love to see it. Yeah.
You know, unless you look at the date, I mean, some of it looks very current.
There you go.
So
there you go.
It's sort of interesting.
It is interesting. Wow. I'm glad you saved all that. It's really important. I think any creative person or artist should save. I mean, not save everything, of course. There's some stuff you got to get rid of, but I guess knowing what's important and not important, you know, I guess you save what's important. And also, I guess you probably found that things are useful, right? I'm sure you've saved things that you use later, maybe, or is that correct?
Yeah, and well, I save it also because sometimes I forget, like, what I created, or, you know, and I look at it, and I'm like impressed. I was like, oh wow, that was pretty good, you know. And that was how many years ago? Like, I have pieces, and I dated everything.
Yeah.
I mean, like 1977, 1980.
Wow.
And we're talking like many, many years ago.
Yeah.
And it's fun because sometimes when I look at it, like, I'll share it with my students, and they're like so blown away by it.
I know. I have some old M magazine. Remember that from the 80s? I have saved a couple of those. That's in the 80s. It was kind of like M. It was by
M.
Yeah, it was kind of a sort of a higher end version of GQ. It was kind of a snootier GQ.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It didn't last that long. Brian Greene, I think, was the guy that Robert Bryan. I think he was the guy that it was a Fairchild publication.
So this is actually just came to me, this story about fashion illustration. So you know, I was illustrating, and I had my favorite fashion illustrators back in the, you know, when I was in school. And fast forward, you know, and I met a lot of people in the city over the years, and this is going back maybe like only 15 years ago. I had a friend of mine was taking fashion drawing, like it was an adult thing, at FIT, Fashion Institute Technology. And it was like, oh, why don't you join us? So I said, okay. So it was fun. They had like a model, they played classical music.
Wow.
And in walks one of the fashion illustrators that I was so inspired by back in the day, who actually works at the school, Steven Stippleman.
Oh, wow.
And I was so freaked out by him being there that I couldn't even draw. Like, I like froze.
So it was a classical case of freezing out of nervousness, because this was your
hero. Yeah. It was kind of funny, actually, but it was such an honor to watch him just create, like, his work. I mean, it's just it had so much style to it. I mean, it was amazing back then, and it's equally as amazing now. Plus being the nicest guy you ever want to meet. I mean, he was really, and I let him know that I was in awe of his work. So that kind of like,
that's great.
Helped break the ice a little bit. But
I'm just curious what he had to say after that. Respond to when you saw him that.
Yeah, he was very humble. I mean, he wasn't, you know. But it was funny because he walked into the studio space where we were doing this, and he had like a cart, like a push cart, filled with like brushes and markers and all kinds of like paint and like supplies. And I was like, oh God. And I didn't realize at first who he was. Yeah. And I was like, God, this person's like really serious about this. Yeah. And it turns out it was Steven Stippleman.
Stippleman, right on. There's been a lot of stuff recently. I don't know, not to get too far off topic, but if you watch Turner Classic Movies, they're doing a lot of fashion stuff now. I don't know if you've been watching, doing like a series and talking about Travis Batten and Adrian and, you know, the old Hollywood.
Yeah, I haven't. I don't really watch a lot of, I mean, like, I have Netflix, I have all the, but I spend my time creating, I mean,
yeah, you're too busy.
But I spend a lot of my time either actually creating stuff or watching like how-to videos on how to create stuff. But my downtime, it's weird. It's not weird. I mean, I don't need to say that, but it's my quote unquote free time is really spent creating or thinking about what my next project is going to be, creative project's going to be. So yeah, I guess I'm missing out in the sense that I'm not allowing myself to watch these great series or films or whatever. Yeah. But
I mean, I only mention it because they're talking about, you know, the best of the studio system, and it's similar. They're talking about similar things. You know, people that try and drawings Coco Chanel's for Betty Davis or for whomever. It's kind of it would interest you. But I'm just wondering if you could take me back to when you first. Well, when did you get the idea to make handbags or purses, and talk about that, because that seems like a whole separate thing unto itself.
Well, so I worked, like I was saying, I worked as a fashion illustrator in the city, and I was hired by an agency, an advertising agency, and I was being brought around to different showrooms, and they would just plop me in the showroom, and they asked me to sketch the collection. Back then they used to do like catalogs, like illustrated catalogs.
Yep.
And so I had, I spent a couple of years doing that, and then I also did graphics. Like logo design and graphic design. Mind you, this was not computer generated. It was like
analog.
Hand painted, hand rendered. It's
all analog.
Hand rendered.
It's beautiful.
And I remember a friend of mine. I had worked for a label company, someone who a company that manufactured labels. I mean, that's the kind of work I was doing also.
Interesting.
And a friend of mine told me about a job opening in the city. It was a handbag company, but they were looking for a graphic person to design hang tags. The tags that hang on. And back then that was like almost like an art form. Every collection had a separate hang tag. So that's what I did for this one company. But, being there as a full-time artist, in-house artist, they needed someone to sketch a bag or two. So I did that. And then next thing I know, it's like sketching more bags and designing more bags.
Wow.
And then realizing like there was travel involved. The company liked what I did.
That's good. That's good.
And there's travel involved. Everything was made overseas. So there's a lot of trips to Taiwan and Hong Kong and China, which was fascinating. Plus there was a lot of trips to Italy and Paris and London for like inspiration.
Sure.
So it's like, who would have thought? I had there was not like on my my plan, my vision plan or anything like that in terms of my career. Mm-hmm. So I kind of just went with it. And I realized as I was doing it, that going to what we were saying earlier about the fabrics and how, different leathers and different, qualities of fabric treat differently. It doesn't matter whether it's on a human or on a bag. But it just created a lot of interest in me. And I kept with it, and I remember I eventually left that company. I went to another company.
Yeah.
And every time I moved around, there was just more opportunity, learning experiences, creative opportunities, and also financial opportunities.
Absolutely.
So it was cool.
Well, do you mind discussing to get a little more philosophic? You right now you are, well, of course we'll get to cakes in a bit and food, but right now you are very much known for your handbags, and so this seems to be something you really are knowledgeable about. What would you say? Of course, bags are very important in female fashion, right? Women's fashion, handbags versus. What if you had to pick the first time when you kind of realized that this was something that you really loved or something that was special? Was there a particular type of bag that you say, well, this bag is a step forward for me that you designed, or something that kind of something that it took your journey to the next level, if that makes sense? Do you remember what that would be?
Well, that's a great question. I look at it, I never thought of it as like this is I never really approached it, especially in the beginning of my handbag design career, as a favorite shape of a bag versus something else. I looked at it as trying to understand like what sold a handbag. Like why does a consumer, and I design men's bags, women's bags, kids' bags, but what about the bag? There's like almost like a science behind designing product that sells, And so I came from that and sort of took that approach, like trying to understand, okay, these are the best sellers from, let's say, last season. How can we update that and create new product that's going to be bestseller? So it was a little different. It was coming from more of a commercial standpoint than an artistic, I guess, standpoint. But at some point, it has to be sort of a combination of the two.
Sure. Well, that in itself is even if your motivation is commercial. I think commercial things also have integrity, or can have integrity. That's just the I mean, I see commercial things as a way for something to get off the ground. It's like a foundation. something, right? You're looking at it. You're looking at an older season. You're saying, well, we need to change that. What sold a lot? That's just gathering information, right, about culture and society. It seems to me if I were designing handbags, that would be the first thing I would do. That makes a lot of sense to me somehow. I don't know,
Yeah.
I don't know why anybody would do it any other way. And, not to be too, it makes sense to me. Is all.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that's sort of how I went about doing it. And then looking at other, like, sort of competitors and, like, trying to figure out their successes and their failures and, like, why. Like, what makes their product better than someone else's, or more saleable or more popular. So there's a lot of that. There was a lot of that, especially in the beginning. I mean, it's still today, and we're talking like decades, like 3 decades later.
Right.
It's like I could look at a bag and say that's a good sell. Like I could immediately get a sense of a bag that would sell versus a bag that might have a little more of a challenge selling. And then it really depends on who you're selling it to, right? Who the customer is.
Sure.
There's all different levels of retail and, high end, mid tier, low end, that type of thing. But I just love all the aspects of it, the marketing part of it, the design part of it.
Do you mind fast forwarding? Because of course the information you sent me, there's this graffiti theme, which is incredible.
Yeah.
And that I looked at that and it was so striking. So very bold, very striking. This graffiti. Talk about, is that going too far ahead? Because that's the present, but
no,
it's fascinating.
That collection, that was back in like 2018, 19. And I was working as a design consultant, and I was going after factories that needed design help. And I thought that was like a good target for me to sort of expand my consulting business as a handbag designer. And the one factory I approached said, you need to have your own line. Like they heard my story, they saw my work, and they're like, you need to have your own line. So I thought, like, I don't want to do that. I just want to make more money. Like, I guess I had very little confidence in the fact that I could launch my own collection. And as a designer, I mean, that was sort of my like secret. That's what I really wanted, but I was afraid, I guess.
So what would you say? What would you say your fear was? Is your fear that if you had your own line, it would not take off and make money? Was that one fear? Or is it? I don't want to speak for you. Only your own heart.
Well, I think there's many different parts of that feeling of fear. It was fear of, and I'm talking like I said, years and years and years of designing handbags and just, not feeling like qualified, I guess. Which, that could be a whole other episode. Not feeling good enough or feeling like you're saying like, that there's a sense of failure. What if it doesn't work? Like all this stuff that I know I'm not the only person that struggles sometimes with those things.
That's all, of course, natural psychologically, but of course, objectively speaking, it's ironic because, the very qualities that make you a success are the things we've been talking about since the episode started, all that experience and knowledge. That's all gonna, right? You're gonna bring all that to the table. And that seems to me.
And I think it took this stranger, a person I really didn't know, to see something in me that I was actually not able to see, and like to be willing to support. So there's a factory who was willing to support me developing a collection of handbags. And I'm going to get back. I'm going to get onto the graffiti. That's where the graffiti came about.
Yeah.
So I put this collection of bags together, and the factory is based out of India. So I got to travel to India twice.
Wow.
It was the first time for me in my whole career. And I just wanted to create product different. And because I'm an artist, and I thought like, what's going to separate me from another startup handbag company? And so I thought like, but I love the idea of graffiti, and it sort of was like a trend at that moment. And I thought, well, I'm not going to try to be in a, like, because graffiti art is like an art in itself.
Yep.
So I was like, you know what? Let me just reach out, and this is kind of funny, to New York graffiti artists.
Oh yeah.
Or it didn't have, I think I just focused on the city because I wanted to be able to work with them like one-on-one. And I remember I posted something on LinkedIn, not LinkedIn, on Craigslist.
Mm-hmm.
Because I knew most graffiti artists probably aren't on LinkedIn, they're probably going on Craigslist. And I got really interesting, like, responses, like, yo, like emails that would be like, you know, it was kind of funny. Anyway,
well, it's funny, while this is going on, there's a retrospective of Wild Style. And, you know, that movie and that, so in other words, there's all these reunions and retrospectives of 80s graffiti art and culture, right, when this is happening.
Yeah.
It's an interesting.
Like the whole Keith Haring, I mean, all of that.
Charles Ahern's Wild Style is the film. Great film.
So anyway, I connected with this graffiti artist. I told him what I was trying to accomplish, like the look. I mean, and it's like collaborating with another artist. It's great when you get that, like, you kind of both get like on the same plane, like the creative plane, so to speak. And then there was a messaging behind it. You know, it was like the whole brand messaging I thought that I wanted to convey was, you know, empowering women through design. So we took the graffiti as a vehicle and just be able to use like messaging through the graffiti art. And he created the art. I mean, he created the art, and the factory in India was able to duplicate it over and over and over again. It was incredible, like, how they're able to do that. I don't even know, quite frankly, how they do it.
You mean you're talking about in terms of the consistency, right? It's just consistent. They can keep. Yeah, that's interesting.
So so that was how that graffiti piece came about. That was part of a much, you know, not much, but a larger collection of bags, you know, and but I have to say, out of all the bags in that collection, that was the group that stood out the most. I mean, the people that, you know, because it's very bold and it's very graphic.
Absolutely. Well, that's why I brought it up. I mean, I'm thinking this is really something and really striking. But I'm sure there are things you want to talk about before that or before now, because you're starting to develop bags. What other things come into your mind about those years when you're really making bags and purses and anything? You can just whatever pops into your consciousness.
Yeah, I mean, the early years of designing bags for me was all about, it was just like one great experience after another. And I mean, great experiences, but also learning a lot about myself as a professional designer. You know, there's a competitive side to me. There's an insecure, you know, it's like it's almost like maturing in my career. You know, and being able, you know, the experiences of being able to work with people from other cultures, you know, people from India or people, well, that was later, people from China or people from Italy, or, you know, and just having that amazing experience and, you know, and realizing that it's a collaboration, you know, like I can come up with a design, but there's a pattern maker that actually can create the 3D version of my design. And then there's someone who sews who can make a finished bag, and there's someone who prints, you know, so there's a lot of different sort of, and people that get involved in, like, I don't know if like the everyday consumer realizes this, but like all that goes into making a product, you know, there's a lot of different moving parts. So that was like that kept me going for many, many years, just like that experience of, you know, and then the satisfaction of being able to create something and then actually see it. I mean, to me, that was one of the biggest, you know, thrills was that, you know, like working, a lot of these factories, they'll give you an office to work in, but then there's like the sewing room, and being able to walk in the sewing room and actually seeing your bags being sewn, to me was like, and I used to get yelled at all the time because they thought I was disturbing the sewers, but I would be like in awe of watching these talented workers like create my designs. You know, that to me was like one of the most satisfying, and still is one of the most satisfying experiences.
It sounds like it. I mean, it would be. I mean, that's a real honor to see it from beginning to finish, right? From starting, and then you seeing it made.
Yeah,
seeing it made.
And to see how satisfied this, let's say, for example, the people who sew the bag, like when they're finished with it, to hold it up to show me, and just like the expression on their face, like to me, it's like, wow, like they know, they got it, like they understood what I was trying to accomplish, and sometimes, and many times, they take it even a step, they improve it, or they take it even a step further, or they know how to make it better, you know. So it's really very rewarding to work collaboratively with another creative person.
Yeah, you have two souls, you know, working. If they come together like that, you get extra. I think at the end, I think everybody needs an anchor in life. You, me, just everybody. Anchor made this whole show possible. I'm immensely grateful to them. You too can use Anchor to make your own shows and create your own vision. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Did you want to, put on your chef's hat, because you're an Italian from New York, right? And
from New Jersey.
I'm sorry, from New Jersey. And you are a chef, and you're in the world of food. And I looked at your bio that you grew up cooking in the kitchen, and food is an important part of your family, but you took it to another level. How did this happen though? How did this?
It's so interesting, design consulting. Well, it kind of works right into like the whole India, launching my own collection. So I was living in the city, Manhattan, working and consulting in handbags. And I moved back to New Jersey after 35 years.
Wow.
I moved back home after 35 years to live with my dad.
Oh, wow.
Who actually is turning 97 in August. And
that's amazing.
Yeah. And who was also a great cook, by the way. But anyway, so I moved back, and I went through a year like 2016 where, for whatever the reason, my design consulting was sort of like on a lull. It wasn't really happening. And, there was a period where I wasn't really working. And I had a friend of mine who was hired back in the 90s as my assistant in handbags. And fast forward, she has two daughters who had graduated or about to graduate high school, who is working as a dean of student affairs at a private all-girls high school that happened to be located like a few blocks from where I was living with my father, and Catholic high school. And she contacted me asking me if I'd be interested in teaching part-time culinary. Oh, wow. She knew I loved to cook, because I had in between that I was doing a lot of like catering and like hosting parties, and she knew I just loved plan. It's similar to like designing a handbag line, like planning a party. I think a lot of planning that goes into it. Instead of showing a line of handbags, I end up presenting food. But in any event, so I went into the interview. Beautiful school. I had no idea that the school I knew it was there. I didn't know what it looked like on the other side of the gates in front of the school. It was on 18 acres, this huge, beautiful campus. The kitchen that I would be teaching out of was like my dream kitchen. And I think that was part of the reason why I just said yes to taking this job. So that was 5 years ago. And there was no real curriculum for culinary, so I had to develop the program.
You created the program.
And that's amazing. Like that whole experience kind of put me in an environment where I got to like sort of be creative with culinary and baking and that type of thing. And that's where, I've always loved to cook. I've always loved to bake. I love the holiday. I'm like, I like good times and parties. But the opportunity to teach, I felt it was like it gave me like a laboratory to work in, and I started, and I knew the girls that I teach, most of them love cake decorating and like, that whole thing. So it was the perfect, it was like perfect timing to start developing that part of my sort of creative journey. And it was just, it just kind of took off from that point, really. If you're,
incredible to me.
Sure.
You're creating a whole class. You're inventing your own curriculum in a school, and it's all around food because of your own, shall we say, experience and excellence at food. And it's kind of amazing. But then, of course, I also read that you become involved with the Food Network, right? And is that later? I'm sure that's later, but
that's actually like recent. But the thing with teaching this, I mean, it's not just baking cookies and decorating cakes. I mean, I wanted to make sure that there was some kind of educational aspect to teaching, like nutrition, food safety.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like how to handle like safely handle a set of knives, like that type of thing.
Oh, yeah.
So I incorporate, and because the school's credited, I mean, there's obviously standards that I have as a culinary arts instructor. I have to follow. So, but I kind of make it so that as they're learning nutrition and as they're learning kitchen safety, it's hands-on and they're creating, executing recipes and they're having they're having a good time. And of course,
Frank, I'm going to pause you there because you have knowledge, almost like CIA knowledge, right? So for our audiences, what are some of the biggest mistakes people make about food safety, spoilage, taking care of food or anything kitchen? What comes to mind? What are the things that you would tell people? Make sure to not do this, or whatever, if you don't mind.
Like improperly handling food, for example, not washing produce properly, or cross-contaminating. Like cutting boards are a real culprit. Like like I teach students, like if you're cutting, let's say, raw chicken on a cutting board, you either have to disinfect the board, you have a separate board just for that, or there's different ways of protecting the surfaces, or even your hands. I mean, obviously this is before pandemic, but like rubber gloves. There's a lot of
details,
and sometimes and like if you're using a knife to, let's say, cut a piece of raw chicken, like you're not going to use that same knife to cut, let's say, a piece of cheese and serve like appetizers, you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing.
Sure.
So it's just like a lot of awareness.
It's almost like in the realm of chemistry, right? And so you're in microbiology and chemistry plays a role, I guess, in cooking, and that's fascinating to me as someone who doesn't possess this knowledge or this skill. So I'm just wondering how you get from this culinary class or school to getting on the Food Network. I'm sure there's a lot of. Was it on the strength of your cakes or the Yeti cake, or was it?
Yeah. So the way that came about was teaching, and every year, and a lot of freedom, a lot of autonomy in teaching. So every year, like towards the holidays, it was like, okay, we need to come up with some kind of like class project. So over the years, it's been these gingerbread structures, and every year they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And posting all this stuff, that and all the other stuff that happens before and after that, posting using social media, just in local community pages on Instagram, and realizing, people, it's like another way for me to share what I love doing. The fact that I do it with students, hopefully inspiring students. I think the parents really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And it was March of 2020 that I was contacted by a casting agent through social media on Instagram.
Wow.
And I was like, at first I thought it was a scam, and I never read my DMs for some reason. Back then I didn't read them. Now I read them. But I saw that there was a message. I read it. And it was a casting agent, and they were casting for, in fact, I got 2 messages from 2 different companies, casting agencies, looking to cast for 2 different shows.
Oh, wow.
So I interviewed, I realized shortly after that this is legit, and I casted for 2 different shows. One was the Christmas Cookie Challenge.
Oh, wow.
Which was a lot of fun. And then the other one was, both on Food Network, and the other one was for Holiday Wars.
Holiday Wars, wow.
Yeah. And I got chosen for Holiday Wars. There were 2 other team members. One was actually from New Jersey, and the other one was from the West Coast.
So you have two people representing the East Coast, Jersey. That's great.
Yeah.
Or not? I mean, that's a little bit.
And it was such an amazing experience. Like flying out the studio we filmed out of, it was like a 3-week gig. You know, of course, because we made it to the semifinals. Otherwise, it would have been a lot shorter. But it was out in Utah. It was just such an incredible experience for me. The minute, and I say this, I talked about this a lot, but the minute I had no idea what to expect. The minute I stepped onto the set with all the producers and the cameras, and like it was like, I was like, I know this is going to happen more than once for me. Like, I just felt like I wanted to have, you know, it was such a great experience. But, you know, and bringing to that experience, a lot of the experiences I had with designing handbags. You know, it's not just about me, it's collaborating with other creative people and the producers and, you know, and the judges and other teams and that type of thing. It was great.
I mean, those are complex institutions, right? Food Network. And you also, I put it that way because they're elaborate, and there's a lot that goes into something like a bake challenge or a holiday cookie or I'm just thinking you also involved with QVC. Is this true? Or?
Yes. It's just so bizarre. All of this is so bizarre so when Food Network reached out to me in March, you know, I kind of get goosebumps thinking about this, and I'll tell you why.
Yep.
The factory, the company that I spoke about earlier, that the guy believed in me and wanted me to launch my own line, contacted me. And this was right before pandemic happened. Like, it was in March, so yeah, 2020. And to let me know that they acquired a brand of handbags and wallets, and that they wanted me to work for them. They wanted me to design for them, and part of the design would be also, presenting it on QVC. And I was like, what? You know, it seemed a little weird. Like, in the same week, I'm talking with people from Food Network, and I have this opportunity to be on QVC showing the bags that I designed. It just seemed really like surreal. So I didn't really talk to them until after I came back from the Food Network trip. Mm-hmm. And I started, actually in August, I started designing for the line, it's called Lotus, Lodis.
Lodis, okay.
Yeah, Lotus. Which is actually, there's a whole history behind that brand. But
okay.
Yeah, so the brand has recognition to a certain degree. Mm-hmm. So it was, you know, and I realized a lot easier. I mean, it's not easy, but less challenging taking that approach than, you know, like Frank La Mendola handbags.
Yeah.
Now, the bags are great, but who is Frank La Mendola? You know what I mean? When you're competing.
Well, Frank La Mendola is a great name, I have to say. You're fortunate. That's a name. I'm going to remember that name, and that's a star-worthy name. But go ahead.
Thank you.
In there.
But anyway, so I thought it was just interesting how it was sort of like it circles back, you know, and and it just there's just a lot going on between the teaching, designing handbags, and I was in LA for a couple weeks as sort of an alternate for another cooking competition. But I've been interviewing. I definitely want to get on more of those food, not necessarily, Food Network or Netflix or Amazon. I mean, there's a whole bunch of.
There are.
It's pretty popular, actually. The whole competitive baking challenge thing. I mean, it's a trend, and I think that people just really. I guess I know, like, a lot of people that have watched the episodes that I was on during Holiday Wars. It was they were really, really excited. It was amazing the amount of support I got around that.
Yep.
And even though I didn't quote unquote win, I still feel like I won.
Well, you won. So in a sense, you feel like you won because you were there. You were on the scene.
Yeah.
Doing that.
Yeah.
And you were in the thick of, like, just. I mean, that's to me, again, it's all fascinating to me. I'm wondering, there's got to be differences between different stations and how they do things. So what's unique to Food Network that's different than how QVC does things, or that comes to mind, or are there more similarities, or is there different?
Well, I mean, the whole QVC thing, it's really interesting. Their whole DNA, you know, is sort of like conversational. It's sort of, you know, yes, people shop the channel. I mean, that's the point of it all. But it's more about connecting with the host
Okay.
So it's almost like being like having someone over your home or having them, having them invite you over. But then the viewer is sort of like they're really connecting with me, my personality. It's not about. It's never like a hard sell. Like these bags are competitive. It's not like you're trying to sell the product. You're really selling yourself and your expertise and your knowledge.
Yeah.
And and it's funny because I know a lot of people in the handbag industry that have been on QVC, and I remember I used to watch it all the time just to see. I think it's like sharing your passion, and this is my experience anyway so far. It's like sharing my passion, like, and it's if I really believe in something and I'm able, I'm given the opportunity to sort of share that with people. I think that's, I don't have to like pretend, what I mean? This is like, I believe in it. Like I believe in this design. I believe in this product. And I think that's what the consumer responds to.
And you're able to do that, I guess, at QVC. It opens up to do that.
I mean, last week, actually, I had an opportunity. I mean, even it was an hour program, which was great. I mean, it's really great. That shows that, but prior to that, they were like, you're given like these 8-minute segments. So you can do that in 8 minutes, but meanwhile, you're not speaking for the whole 8 minutes. You have someone else that's talking. So like in your the moments, the little nips, the snippets that you have to be able to talk about it. Yeah. Hopefully it comes across. But,
well, a lot will come across if they give you an hour. That's kind of. I'm looking at the Lotus website now, summer 2022. I don't know if you represent it here or not, but
some of the product. Yeah, so I personally think the website needs an overhaul, but
I'm sure it does. Wasn't commenting on the website itself.
Right, but the product on the website is a representation of the product that I've worked on and then the previous designer, who I happen to know and who I think is an amazing designer as well. The way I understand it, he just didn't have the time to dedicate to building the brand, to further building the brand that was required. But I think the product, it's sort of targeting the, like the American consumer. Yeah, I think there's a lot of value, and I'm not just doing a plug for the handbags, but I really believe that the value, it's value at a good price. I mean, the bags all retail under, and that's the goal, under $200.
Yeah, so that's something.
My job is to create really great fashion
in that price
pieces. Yeah, fashion and function, because I mean, that's why people carry handbags.
Sure. I'm wondering, in your bio it says you've worked with Walmart and Kmart, right?
Right.
So that would be an example of the most affordable, or the I guess the more humble.
Let me tell you, that is the most challenging, because
interesting.
Price. It's such a price-driven business. Like that's like at that level, at that retail level. So you need to offer the look, offer the fashion, the function, but at a price. And it's really, really challenging to do it. Like when you have a little more room, in terms of what the bag has to actually cost, it's just a lot easier. Yeah. But that's where I started. I mean, when I first started in this industry, it was for those retailers like Walmart, not even Target. Target, it's like Walmart, Kmart, Sears, like real opening price points.
That's right. I just wanted to sort of do a somersault turn, and so if you go from that, so what would be the example that the highest end things that you've done if you had to going from the other end and the qualities of that?
The highest, I think the highest end would be actually prior to me launching my own brand under my own name. There was a couple that I worked with where we were it was a collaboration, and we developed a line of handbags, or I developed a line of handbags that was like high end. So it was like using exotic skins, beautiful leathers out of Italy. So the bags were retailing for like anywhere from like $900 to like $1,500, $2,400 per bag. Right. The bags were pretty, but we didn't sell any.
You didn't sell.
It's hard at that space. In that space, you're competing with like designer brands,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know. And I think if someone's going to spend $2,400 on a bag,
Yeah.
they're probably going to want like Gucci or Prada or something
Sure.
Yeah.
But I get the sense, though, I do get the sense that, you know, when you look at a real Prada bag, you know, in front of you, that you kind of know what went into it. You can, because you have the eye, right? You can look at it and see what makes it. You know, of course, you may use some of those things in your own work. I'm sure some of those. I mean, it's probably a whole. That's probably a whole. I would say universe unto itself, having to do with stitching and seams, or just I don't know what materials. Yeah. So
I could tell just picking up a bag.
Yeah.
Like that it's a well-made bag. Like the feel of it, the weight of it, the hand feel of the leather, the quality of the leather, the quality of the hardware.
Yeah.
I mean, that's you know, everything. That's all that goes into those high priced. In fact, during that time where I was working, you know, collaborating on this higher end collection, I also have contacts in Italy. I mean, working in Italy, it's all about. I mean, the factories that I associate with in Italy and the material suppliers, it's all about quality.
Sure.
Like price. Again, when you're working at that level, it's like price isn't really an issue because you don't want to sacrifice or compromise the quality because of price. Mm-hmm. So it's different. It's a different mindset than looking at either the level I'm working at now or for sure like Walmart and Kmart.
Sure. It's so interesting to me. How did it feel when you first went to Italy, which is your home? It must have been something for you to first visit Italy.
I'm trying to think. I do remember my first Italy trip was for handbags. It was a shopping trip to find inspiration, and then there's shows that take place in Milan usually or Bologna. It's like leather shows, like so the leather suppliers. So it's an industry thing. So my first trip, I remember. I definitely felt a connection, and I mean. It was exciting. I loved it. And that feeling hasn't left me at all. In fact, there was a period during the mid-90s where I was really thinking about moving to Italy. And there's a lot of especially particularly like the Florence area, because that's where all the handbag companies are, like many of the handbag companies are located. And a lot of the really Italian tanneries, like fine Italian tanneries are located. Mm-hmm. So I thought this is the place for me. And I was studying Italian. And I remember going on interviews, and I actually had a job offer. There was some kind of the living situation or whatever didn't work out, so I ended up not. And then plus I was in a relationship at the time, so it didn't work out. But
that's part of life.
I don't know.
Wow.
I haven't really given up on that.
Sure.
Yet. I mean, you never know. In fact, I'm leaving for Italy later this summer.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and I'm having a bunch of bags shipped. Lotus bags that are actually being shipped to Italy, and we're doing a photo shoot on the Amalfi Coast. So how bad is that? You know, like it's like things are great. I mean, it's like there's always something to look forward to. I feel like in the work that I do.
Isn't that where Blahnik lives? That coast, isn't he, or is he in? I don't know.
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. I sort of there's so many trends in food, and you're in food too, and I'm just wondering. You're making desserts. You're making things that are for food for pleasure, right? Cookies and cakes. But I imagine you have to keep up with trends in science and nutrition and styles and fashions of ingredients. What comes to mind when you think about all of that? You know, and sort of. I mean, what comes to my mind is I really hate stevia, and they put it in everything now.
Yeah, and I tried all different types, but like I have friends that are like, oh, you got to try this brand. It's like, you know what? It all leaves like a really nasty aftertaste. Like I don't need sweet. I'm not craving sweet that much that I have to use that. Like that's just me.
Sure, but you take note that everybody's putting stevia and everything now. That's a fashion thing. But are there things like that more seriously that you think ingredients that this ingredient has got to be in this cookie, this ingredient has got to be the thing in this cake, otherwise it won't be the cake. It won't be what's an example of that? Kind of a chemistry thing.
The one thing that comes to mind in mind, and this is really from being on the Food Network and seeing the other competitor, the other teams, because they always giving you challenges, like you have to create something that, a sweet and sour theme, or and black garlic. Like, I'm not really sure about that, but like I think that sounds like, and I've heard it mentioned more than once, especially watching these food shows, where it seems like it's a trendy ingredient.
Yeah.
But there was one contestant, one team that actually they incorporated it into their cake.
Okay.
And I don't think it went over well with the judges, to be honest with you, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
But yeah, so things like, let me remember. Let's see what other trends. Like that seems like a current trend in food, or
there's a trend. Hold that thought. There's a trend from. I hope it's dying out. It's still big here where I live, unfortunately. Is breadless crust. It's made out of pine nuts. Is that still going?
Oh, really?
Is that still? Oh, it's
that
awful.
Delicious.
Oh, you think it's delicious? Yeah. Well, I like a traditional crust. That's why. Yeah. Well, I guess.
You mean crustless bread, and then they use nuts instead?
Oh yeah, all that stuff and pies and then. Yeah, I don't like it, but that is a trend, right?
Like, well, I think the whole vegan thing. I mean, there's substitute like cauliflower. Like
it's totally ruined cheesecake. Like, try to find. I can't find a decent New York cheesecake. And I mean, outside of New York, because they don't. There's no crust. It's all pine nuts, or it's crustless, or it's.
I actually like pine nuts, but if there's a time and place for that. Yeah. So I totally get that, but like right now, in baking, what's really popular is hyper realistic cakes.
Okay.
So cakes that look like almost anything, like you could think of, like a cell phone, or a hamburger,
or like your Yeti cake. Is like that.
Sorry?
Your Yeti cake, your abdominal snowman.
Well, even more hyper realistic. I mean, that's like a story, like that's telling a story. But I'm talking about, you look at this and you don't realize it's a cake.
Oh, okay.
So it could be. I'm trying to think. It could be like a mug of coffee, but it's actually a cake.
Yeah.
Or people that make these busts that look like celebrities. I mean, it's kind of creepy, actually.
It is.
But I say that because it's a trend, and there's actually a game show on Netflix. It's called "Is This Cake?" and that's a whole show based around that trend. It's really interesting.
Wow.
I don't know, like there's something about cutting into a dog, especially if it's my dog, that I don't feel comfortable with.
Sure,
like if it looks that realistic, I could see like a cutesy version of it, but
no.
Yeah, so it's sort of fun.
So they've done iPhones, I'm sure, right? A cake like an iPhone or a computer.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it's as an art form, it's amazing because it's like, how do they create it? I mean, I just actually, and saying this to you, I just created a few pieces because I am being considered for one of these shows that they asked for hyper-realistic cakes.
Yep.
So it's sort of like pushing. I was like, even though it's not my thing, but I said, all right, let me try and see what it's like. And it's actually fun. I mean, I don't know if I would do it if it got me on another show for sure. But but there is a lot of interesting food trends. Trying to think, I can't think off the top of my head because I do cooking also, and I do catering.
Interesting.
I like, and especially what I love about catering, and I have a party coming up actually this July before I leave for my trip, is it's an opportunity to cook delicious food, healthy, delicious food, but to present it in a way that's really beautiful. Like it's all about presentation.
So this July, do you mind sharing with the audience what that's going to be? Do you know what that food's going to be, or what that?
Oh, I do, because I catered for the same person. I did a party last year in July. It was her 60th birthday.
Wow! And
she asked if I could do it again, exactly the same menu again this year.
Okay.
But for less people. So I think it's a small, intimate wedding.
Wow.
So the menu, I know exactly what the menu is because it's exactly what I did last year.
Okay.
Do you want to know what it is?
Sure, of course.
Okay, so some of the appetizers, I don't know if I remember everything. There's a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Appetizers I made, they were amazing crab cakes. I never made a crab cake before, and they were absolutely delicious. Of course, it's all about using the best ingredients, in my opinion. And I made grilled peaches with like prosciutto and I think it was goat cheese prosciutto and like a balsamic drizzle.
Yeah.
I made lemon and leek arancini, which are like rice balls. It's sort of like the Italian type of thing. Those are really delicious. I made, what else did I make for appetizers? I can't think off the top of my head. Then for the main course, there was 3 different, I made a swordfish with puttanesca sauce, which is like out of this world. That was actually my father's recipe.
Oh, wow.
And then I made the tenderloin, which is excellent. People are still talking about this food.
I'm sure
and that to me, and then I made, what was the third thing I made? Oh, some kind of chicken. It was like a chicken stuffed with mushroom and shiitake. Mushroom.
Yeah.
And spinach and shallots.
Oh. Wow.
And then the dessert was like a limoncello.
Yeah.
Tiramisu.
Oh, wow.
And then I did like mango sorbet and like I carved out oranges and I used like edible flowers and it was just like really, really beautiful. And so satisfying. I mean, I love to cook, but like so satisfying to see people enjoying it.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, as exhausting as it was pretty. I remember there was supposed to be someone, like 2 people were supposed to help me, but because of the pandemic, they weren't able to make it. They were sick.
Yeah.
Everyone, like the guests, ended up helping, but it was fine. It was like very casual, but it was great, and I'm looking forward to doing it again.
Well, that's right around the corner.
Different things.
Yeah.
But she loved it so much that she said, "Just please repeat what you did last year."
Sure.
So I'm going to.
Well, if it's not broken, it's great. Do it again. Yeah. Don't eat that. That's I'm getting hungry hearing about all that. I sort of think it's really something. I mean, I'm thinking about you growing up. You said you grew up in Jersey in a family of people that take food seriously.
Yeah.
What is that like? Just those of us that aren't so fortunate. What is that? I guess food has a different meaning for you then, right? Than if you know. If you grew up in kind of a more Philistine kind of a food illiterate background, you know, what was that like growing up in that?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends from my perspective, it's about everything evolves around food. Uh-huh. You know, today I'll go visit my dad, just short visit, and it's like, did you eat? Do you want to eat? You sure you don't want to eat? Like, it's all about food. It's like, it's the nurturing, right. You know, like I just made this or I just made that. Like, and if I'm not eating, I'm taking food home with me. So it's always been that way. So, you know, if it's not, and we'll be eating a meal and it'll be like, okay, what are we having for dinner tomorrow night? You know, it's like almost like an obsession with food. Mm-hmm. So, and if you're not feeling well, if you're feeling depressed, or if you like eat something, you'll feel better.
Right.
Like, you know, it's sort of comical, but like, it's that type of thing. That's now when you talk about like special occasions, like the holidays, mm-hmm. It's just another excuse to make food and to plan on cooking and baking and that type of thing. So it was sort of like growing up in that kind of environment, which I'm trying to, I realize for me, like, you know, teaching culinary, it's like every day I get to cook. You know, truth be told, like that's sort of like the story behind what, you know, like, and like how these young girls experience things that maybe they haven't tried before. Oh, wow. You know, that kind of thing.
You know, Frank, it occurs to me, this has been such an interesting episode. If you had to think back, I don't know, this pops into my head spontaneously, of a Frank purse that you designed, anything. Frank La Mendola purse that you're the most proud of. You're like, this is the purse. Is there a single purse or purses that come to mind? You're thinking, wow, you accomplished something with that purse, and a woman has that purse, and she's the sky's the limit. It's made her. What pops in?
Well, I would have. I come from 2 different. Like, there's a lot of. Well, not a lot. There's a few pieces that I'm really proud that I designed. Unfortunately, those bags never got to market, but I'm still proud of them because I look at them as like works of art that I created. And then there's the bag that maybe not as exciting, you know, in terms of what quote unquote works of art. It might, you know, I guess I'm being a little like overly critical, but I know like I'll give you an example that people respond to. This is just going back maybe 4 weeks ago.
Oh wow!
I was in the grocery store right before shop, because I usually shop for a class right before school starts, like so it was early. And I'm pushing the cart in the grocery store, and I hear, "I love your bag." And I turn around, and it's a woman carrying one of the bags that I presented on QVC that she ordered.
Oh, wow.
And I was sort of like dumbfounded because it was like I wasn't expecting it. Sure. And she was just going on and on about how great the bag was, and how roomy it was. And then in retrospect, I'm thinking to myself, I should have been like filming her saying all this stuff. It would have been like a perfect
PR.
Sort of like, yeah. But so that, to answer your question, like that, I mean, it doesn't get better than that. Like when it's like you made the connection and someone really loves, and like they appreciate what you do, what I've created.
Yeah.
They went ahead and bought it, and they're happy with their purchase. Like to me, that's like a home run. I mean, it's really, really rewarding.
I mean, that's a great answer. I mean, that's really something, right? I mean, that is an art form, clearly, even though it's a practical art, right? I know. I see that in your bio it says that you teach the practical arts. Is that it's an interesting category?
So in addition to culinary art, I teach fashion design.
Okay.
And I teach studio art. So it's like painting, drawing.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So you cover it all?
It's funny. Wow. I'm sorry?
You're doing it all. You're covering everything there.
Yeah, and it's great because, the way the school is situated, I have two really great classrooms, like next to each other, the kitchen, and then next to the fashion room.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a private school, so my classes are relatively small. Mm-hmm. Like culinary, I have anywhere between 12 and 10 students per class. And then in fashion, I mean, I have like maybe 6 or 8.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really it's great to work that way, and then studio at the 5th. But so those are considered practical art classes, elective courses.
Yeah.
And I've had students that have gone on to either I had one student that was really interested in culinary, and she went on to study that further after graduating. And then I have a few few students that are going into fashion.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
I sort of feel like this has been such a rich episode. Very, to me, very fascinating. So even though it's been, for me, really good, even good things come to an end. Is there anything you want to express to the audience in this episode that you think is important as we come towards conclusion that about anything at all that you feel you want to express or share with the...
I don't want it to sound like a cliche, but, just in my experience over the years, and I still feel like there's more to come, it's like, just I never give up. Like, I'm grateful. Like, first of all, I know that my creativity is a gift, and I realized just recently, over the past, 10 years, 5 years maybe, that, like, it's about sharing. It's like that's where it's like you give it away and you get more in return. I feel like it seems like I never run out of creative energy as long as I continue sharing it.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's a handbag, whether it's a meal, whether it's a cake, you know what I mean? And it's fun, so I feel like for anyone who's listening that's a creative, and it could be in acting, it could be in music, it could be, classical piano, I mean, whatever. It's just, I think that's, as a creative person, it's like about sharing it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've certainly shared your time and generosity with us today, and I thank you, Frank La Mendola. This has been great.
Oh, this is great.
Yeah, and I like to get into the weeds, as you can tell, about things, and I don't mind that getting into detail. So I thank you for doing that here. And
absolutely, it was fun.
I look forward to you sharing your passion too. Further.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.
I don't like goodbyes, so I'll see you soon, folks. Thank you.